Welcome back, Richard. This week, we're going to talk about one of our favorite topics. Not our favorite topics because it's a pleasant topic, but
Right.
our favorite topics because it is something that so many people struggle with. And
Right.
that is the idea of failure.
Right. Yeah, failure, you're right, people struggle with it. If you have children, you want your children to avoid failure. If you're an adult, you want to avoid failure. I mean, at all costs, whatever I do, I can't fail, because failure in our culture, failure is a huge embarrassment.
Right.
I was talking to a newly minted master's level licensed mental health counselor the other day, who is now that all the coursework has been completed, must take the exam. And there's this fear of the exam. And I don't think it's the exam. I think it's a fear of failure. So I advised them, I said, go take the exam and don't tell anybody that you're taking it. So if you fail, nobody knows, you're not embarrassed. But isn't it, but it's too bad that failure is or not succeeding is considered such a horrible thing to experience, at all costs.
And I think that maybe it's because of, I know that you have a similar history in science and in research where failure is what happens most of the time. Because, when you're doing research, especially a basic science research, laboratory-based research, most of the things that you try fail.
That's right. And it, those of us who write for publication,
right,
you get as many rejections, maybe more rejections than you get acceptances.
Right.
I spoke to a guy who's written a dozen books and hundreds of articles, and he said, it doesn't make any more sense when they're accepted than when they're rejected.
Right.
He said, I don't know why some get accepted. And so sometimes I think I've done a really masterful piece and it gets rejected. And other times I just send it in and it gets accepted. So
Right.
yeah, you're right. We experience disappointment and failure in this business far more than success.
Absolutely. So we found an article from Psychology Today that talks about the benefits of failure. And it's written by Nigel Barber. He's an evolutionary psychologist. So
I love evolutionary psychology. I have a weak spot for evolutionary psychologists.
it is so interesting. But yeah, he has an interesting perspective when it comes to failure, and it's very consistent with the way that we see it.
Right. Yeah, he talks about in our culture. He said, and he mentions that along the way, that in our culture we value winning, we value success. Okay, and particularly the American culture, and we tend to think that all cultures are similar to ours, and that all economies are similar to ours, and they're not. But our culture has evolved in such a way that we create winners and losers. I think when the first immigrants arrived from Europe, they weren't the first immigrants, but the first immigrants from Europe had to be cooperative in order to survive. But somehow our culture has evolved so that now it creates winners and losers. And our culture values the rugged individual, I did it myself, kind of concept.
Right.
And where this comes in is things like, and we could go across the sports world, but I think that it's the easiest place to see this. We're in the last month of the college football season. We're narrowing down. Now there's 130 schools in what is called Division I. It's the major university programs. And these are the football teams that will play in the December and January bowl games, okay? And it's called the Football Bowl Subdivision, the FBS. And this year, or later this year, sometime in December, the four top teams out of 130 will play each other. So team one will play 4, team 2 will play 3, and then those 2 winners will play for the championship. And there'll be only one. So you start with 130 teams, And each team probably has, I don't know, 40 or 50 players on it. So when you think of 130 teams and all those players, it's going to come down to 2 teams, and only one will win.
Well, and what's even more interesting than that is that then they'll take that one team that won,
Mm-hmm.
and then they will identify the MVP, the one person who was integral to winning the whole thing. And yeah, you have to, it's like we take all of these people and whittle it down to just this one person.
One person, one team, and one person.
One person is the one that made all the difference.
And that's what we admire. That's who gets to go to Disney World. That's who gets to go, And, we just finished the baseball season.
Right.
And the World Series. There's only one winner. Okay. It's just the way it works.
Right.
But you can also see this in our economic system,
Right.
because our economic system creates very big winners.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Elon Musk. And those are just the ones we hear about. There's a bunch of others out there who are doing the same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, not all countries, not all cultures, not all economies work this way, but ours does. Okay. The fact of the matter is ours does. And it values the winner. That's what we love. We love the winner.
And that starts very young.
Absolutely.
We start that maybe even before elementary school, where,
Mm-hmm.
where we want kids. I mean, we have soccer that starts for 3-year-olds, 3 and 4-year-olds.
Right.
And again, although it's not supposed to be about winning, boy, everybody cheers when kids score a goal, or and not that we shouldn't, but again, we're creating this tone of it's better to be the person who wins. It is better to be the person that comes out on top for all of these reasons we celebrate.
Berney, have you ever played Candyland?
Yeah.
What age was your opponent?
Well,
3?
Yeah.
Okay. And it matters then.
Yeah.
That we let them win, or
to the point that some kids will even cheat.
That's right.
Even that young.
At 3 and 4 years old, they'll cheat and they'll throw temper tantrums. And so this idea of winning appears very, very early, and it's fostered very, very early. Winning, for some reason, winning is important, even in young. It's almost in our DNA.
Right.
That you see a 3-year-old having a temper tantrum, or is even more to the point, a 3-year-old will cheat to win.
Right. No, absolutely.
They got their own rules. Change the rules.
That's right. Oh boy, that's always fun. And now don't get us wrong. Of course, we should always give our best, and we want to encourage kids to always give their best. And we don't believe in participation trophies.
I really don't. I am, and for anybody who's listening, I am absolutely opposed to participation trophies.
Right.
Right.
But there's a difference between those things that are inherently competitive, like sport.
Right.
There is only one team that wins in sports.
That's right.
But there are other things where we kind of create this winners and losers mentality that aren't competitive in nature necessarily.
Exactly.
But we kind of create that situation so that there is no other option but to be the best.
That's right. That's right. Because I like the idea of having just one champion. I think it makes the whole thing more interesting, more exciting. I mean, as much as everybody hates their team to lose, the concept of having one winner really makes for an exciting. I mean, you follow football, soccer, and you have a couple of championships during the year, correct?
Right.
But you've explained it to me, and I can never get it straight. But you watch that competition all year long, okay, across several championships, but that's what makes it interesting, that only one team. Is there a tie? Can you have a tie in soccer?
In individual matches, but not at the end,
not at the end. So you can have a tie going in, but in the end, somebody will be the single winner. Okay. So we think that we think that you should do your best. Okay. There's no question about that. We don't like participation trophies. We think that everybody should do his or her best all the time. But I know that there are some people who will rise higher than others, and some are going to achieve more wealth and power than others. It's just baked into our system. So I know that some are going to rise higher. Now, there is a downside to this. In today's economy, and we hear about this all the time, and so just in fairness, there's a downside to this accumulating as much wealth and power as you can, because we've heard about the 1%, the famous 1%. They own more wealth than 90% of the people in the country, and that there's an imbalance there that we should do. And the system is structured. Our system is structured so that the rich get richer, because the way we make wealth in this country, you have to have money to make money, and so the system is rigged in a way to help the very wealthy. Okay,
right.
But and we know that.
Right, and again, it's one of those situations where we're creating a competitive environment when it doesn't necessarily have to be competitive.
It doesn't have to be that competitive,
right?
That kind of capitalism. But at the same, and people complain about that, and I agree. But that's a political decision. It's also a system that fosters and encourages creativity and innovation and enterprise. Okay, and these kinds of qualities are not always evident in all cultures. I talked to a fellow a couple years ago. He's from a European country, and he happens to be involved in music. Okay, and he said, and I was asking him about the difference in the country where he lives is that once you become a conductor or a teacher, it is a position that you have for the rest of your life.
Right.
Okay, so it's sort of government supported. And he said, while the security of knowing that you are going to get paid and you're going to have this job, while the security is nice, he said it dulls creativity. He said the most creative things are happening in the US, because musicians in the US have to keep producing, creating, pushing, moving the boundaries, right. Because if they don't, they're going to get left behind.
Right.
And he said, while the security feels good, the creativity is missing.
Right.
And that's just in music. But I think you'd see that everywhere. If
right.
every professional team got the same thing, they would. Why would they play hard? Why would they practice?
Absolutely.
So yes, while there's a downside, there's also the advantage of what this competition will do.
Right. And but even when we take that into consideration, and we think about music, or we think about sports team or whatever,
right.
there are they still fail at times, right? So that part of that creativity, part of that exploration of new ideas and new approaches to things, comes that risk of failing.
Right.
And we have certainly seen that with really famous musicians and artists who create something and it's like a flop.
Right.
It just doesn't take off the way that you would have expected it to, based on who it was that produced it or created it. And so that, along the lines of what we want to talk about today is that, while success is really important, the benefit that pushing yourself, outside of your comfort zone and pushing your limits a little bit, risking failure and experiencing and accepting failure can provide a great lesson and many more opportunities for us.
Right. Yeah. And so again, I go back to sports. We talk in sport. Well, heck, you coached for years,
right?
And you talk to your players about they have to be gracious winners, but they also have to be good losers.
Right.
You don't get to get angry. You don't get to cheat. You don't get to be physically aggressive, and you have to be a good sport. During the competition, you play as hard as you can, but in the end, you shake hands.
Right.
All right. And so, win or lose, you have to learn how to do both. We do that in sports all the time. Win or lose, you have to do your best. I talked earlier about the 130 teams in college football. Did 129 fail?
Right.
Only one can succeed. Okay. So we have to be careful about how we conceptualize failure. My goodness, only one player was named the most valuable player, the MVP? Does that mean thousands of college athletes failed?
Well, and the other side of that is, when you're talking about an American football team,
Right.
there's how many players on a team? 40?
Almost 50, it's 40 something.
40 something. There are players on that team that will get a championship ring or whatever and have never been on the field.
That's right. That's true. Same thing with the World Series and the Super Bowl.
Right. So it's not necessarily, we look at it at an individual basis, like there's just this one winner and part of this, but what is it teaching? And when we bring it down to who we're really who we think about often, who I think about often, and that comes down to like kids and and especially kids in school,
right?
We kind of get into this perspective where we define who the winner is by things like grades.
Yeah.
And so we look at how well a student's doing in school. And, I get in trouble sometimes when I'm working in the schools and I say that, I can't stand it when students are making all A's all the time.
Right.
Because when we're thinking about that, what are we talking about when we say that a student is getting all A's all the time? It's like, okay, well, they're the winners. Those are the best kids. Those are the kids. That's their kids. That's the top of their class.
Right.
Those are the kids that we're expecting to get really high scores on the SAT. We create these competitions where competitions don't necessarily exist.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. When I was in school, and I hate to begin any paragraph with when I was in school, but for many years, a B or a C was really considered successful. I mean, a C was what you would get if you did the assignment, okay? And if you succeeded, very few A's. There were almost, it's a normal curve. And you might have 2 kids in the class who fail, but you'd only have 1 or 2 who get A's, right? The rest of us, everybody else got B's and C's. And that was how the system was structured. Right. Oh, in the last 40 or 50 years, now everybody wants to get all A's, okay? It's a very different ethic. And you're right, you define success as getting all A's. But how did you get those A's? How was the system rigged, number one? And how did you get those A's? Are you really succeeding? What are you succeeding at when you get all A's?
Right. Yeah, and we look at things like perfect attendance. You get an award for perfect. If COVID has taught us anything, it's if you're sick, don't come to school.
Right.
So we award kids for perfect attendance, which it's great. Don't get me wrong. It's great to be at school every day because you have access to everything every day. However, none of us can control if we get sick.
I think of those perfect attendance kids. I talked to a woman one time. I think her mother was a teacher. She said she didn't miss a day of school in 12 years.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that most kids are generally pretty. How do you say? That means she went to school when she was sick.
That's wonderful biology because
I want those genes, right? I want to drink out of her Coke can.
Right.
I mean, that mean that she had to go to school either when she had to. I mean, you couldn't get through all of childhood. Right. Perfect attendance. So is it really a success? We think of it as success. We reward it. We give a prize at the end and say you had perfect attendance. But look a little deeper, and is it really success?
Right.
And whether it's SAT scores, all A's, perfect attendance, whatever metric we use in schools to sort kids out, is it really success? Because in pursuing that, we forget that there's this other piece that all of us should be attending to.
Absolutely. Okay. And there are going to be some people who do better and some students who don't do as well.
That's right.
It's just the way that the system works. It's just the way that life works because we have that, as you mentioned a moment ago, that natural normal distribution of performance and skill level and all of that.
That's right.
But there's some flaws when it comes to this assumption that it's always good to succeed and it's always bad to fail.
That's right. That's the first assumption, that you have to succeed and you have to do everything you can to avoid failure.
Right.
That sounds okay. There are many, many families, many individuals live that way. Many adults
Right.
live their own lives with, I must always succeed. I can never fail. My goal in life is to avoid failure and always succeed. Okay. But there are two flaws with that.
Right.
And one of them you've already mentioned. For those students who get all A's, it means either the work is too easy,
Right.
and they know how to get an A, which means they should be doing harder work, they should be challenged more, okay? Or they're doing something, maybe they're a perfectionist, okay? Maybe they're getting help from parents, I don't know, we don't know. But if you're getting all A's, it means that the work is too easy, or you're approaching it in a way that may not be healthy.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I don't say you're doing something wrong or untoward or you're being dishonest. It's
Right.
just that if you're getting all A's all the time, then it's okay. But maybe,
Right.
maybe you need to push a little harder, or you need to be given something else, because if you get all A's, if you never fail, if you never struggle, you're going to miss the opportunity to develop some qualities that you should have.
Absolutely. And, you know, there are some kids who just learn naturally, easily. It really takes a very little effort for them to learn something new.
But Bernie, in a school of 500 kids, how many are we talking about who do that?
5?
Yeah, just a tiny, tiny fraction.
Right.
Okay, of kids who are capable of getting, no matter where you put them, they're going to get all A's. Okay, we don't deny that that exists, but when you have a school where of 500 kids and 200 get A's,
right,
there aren't 200 kids in that category.
There shouldn't be. And again, if a student is getting all A's for whatever reason, then as you said, you know, perhaps we should be looking into pushing them ahead a little bit harder, giving them a little bit more challenging, stretch them a little bit so that they have to, you know, because Richard, how many times do we see kids that are making all A's and it's like effortless? It appears to be effortless to them. They're like, you know, I don't really have any homework, you know, I don't really, I don't really have to study or anything.
Right.
Fine. You hear that kind of thing all the time.
Right.
And if that's truly the case,
right,
fantastic. But let's push them a little bit more, because they need to be stretched. Because what happens, because we've been in the primary and secondary schools, we've also worked in the colleges. And what happens when those students go to college, haven't ever been pushed the way that they will be pushed in college. Right. And then they start falling apart.
Right. I have had adults, college graduate students in my office crying because they didn't get an A on the assignment.
Right.
Because their goal was to get all A's. That was the goal. I have to get all A's. Okay.
Right.
And in tears. Yeah. Because they didn't get an A. Okay?
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's how much we value this thing, that even as adults, we're still pushing it. All right. So, and we talk about perfectionists, you know, for those students who have to get an A, you know, I'm going to get all A's. We know that many people that we would classify as perfectionists have diminished resilience. They're not flexible. If they're not perfect, they're failures. Right. There's this either or mentality in people who are perfectionists. Well, at some point in your life, you're not going to be perfect. Right. Nor should you be. I mean, nobody values perfectionism. Okay. But at some point, and I don't want you to experience that when you're 25 or 15.
Not for the first time, right?
No, get it out of your system when you're young. You know, perfectionism is you know, you got to be very careful with perfectionism, because if it doesn't happen, things could come apart in a hurry. So the first flaw is I think that you've never really been tested. The second flaw is that experiencing success doesn't prepare you for anything. Right. I mean, if you've always succeeded, you're not really prepared to do anything. Right. Ironically, failure is really the best qualification. How you handle failure and disappointment is the best qualification for life after school.
Right.
Okay. So flaw two is you have to experience failure in order to learn how to manage it,
Right.
because failure is going to happen.
Right.
Right. And so by robbing children of the opportunity to fail, you're robbing by making it so that your children never fail, you're denying them the opportunity to learn to develop the skills they're going to need to manage real life.
Yeah. I mean, certainly just think about the lesson you're teaching. The first time you're basically teaching your child that the first time you try anything, you will be successful at it.
Right.
When else will that happen in your life? I mean, that doesn't happen to, adults in most circumstances.
No.
So we can't continue to press that with our kids to let them have that false belief.
It's a false belief, right?
Anything you try, you're going to be successful at.
That's right. If you've been in school, you succeed in first grade and second grade and third grade and fourth grade, and you begin to get this notion that, well, I'm going to succeed at everything each year. That's not how life is going to be for anybody. Okay. And so what are the advantages? We talk about what are their advantages to failure? And we came up with three.
Right.
One of them is persistence. Yeah. People who fail learn how to stick with it and work through it. Right. And the two people that this author Barber mentions are Harry Truman and Edison, Thomas Alva Edison. And he talks about the many failures that Edison famously had tried 1,000 different filaments until he found one that worked. It's always on TV. They persist until they succeed. Right. They don't throw their hands up and give up, and they say, okay, I got to get, like you said, we fail more than in our business, we fail more than we succeed.
Right.
A baseball player, if he gets a hit every third at bat, if he only fails 2 out of 3 times, he's a superstar.
Right.
Right. And so nobody expects him to get a hit every time he bats up. Okay. So it's just not, so you persist. When you begin to fail, when you begin to falter, when you fall short of expectations, you learn persistence. And that's important.
Yeah. Now, another advantage is that failure teaches us how to adapt and change to our ever-changing world.
Right.
Again, something that we've learned over the past couple of years with COVID and everything is that we have to adjust and we have to be able to adapt. But when we come to things with such a rigid perspective, because the first thing I always try is always the most successful thing.
Right.
Then we don't really have any problem-solving skills that extend outside of that.
That's right. And the other thing is, if you're always successful, you always do the same thing.
Right.
Okay, this is how I'm going to work. Kids who say, well, if I cram the night before, I always get an A.
Right.
And so what do? They cram the night before. Is that good for you? No, that's not good learning strategies, but that's what they do. So they do the same thing over and over again. If you have failed, you learn how to do new things. You try new things. So you adapt and change with the circumstances.
Right. And the third advantage is that failure builds resilience.
Right.
Right. Whenever we are confronted with failure, anytime we experience failure, we have to become resilient to that and try something different, as we were just talking about with adapting and changing. We have to build the ability to cope with and manage failure so that we can keep going.
Right, that's right. Because there are these experiments done with rats where they'll, if they hit a bar, they get a food pellet. They hit a bar, get food. Hit a bar, get food. Then you stop sending the food, and the rat starts to go crazy. So jumping up and down, biting the thing, smacking it, biting it, running around the cage, jumping up and down. Well, that's a rat's way of trying new things. They try what they can try. As humans, we have a large repertoire of alternative behaviors that we can use. I mean, that's what separates us. But we have to learn that. We have to have the opportunity to become resilient, to develop adaptive behaviors, to develop persistence. Okay. And you do that by experiencing failure.
Right.
Mhm.
So, in our culture, we value success.
Right.
I think, well, all cultures value success. We define success in different
Mhm.
ways, but we value success. And though we work so hard to avoid failure,
Right.
again, the idea is that the path to success is riddled with failures.
Mhm.
And we have to keep pressing. However we're going to define success, we have to keep pressing through and learn that ability to cope with failures and to learn from those failures, and
Right.
to understand what works, what doesn't work, so that we can continue to press towards whatever our ultimate definition of success
That's
is.
right. Persistence. You have to keep working at it. Okay. So what are the advice? What's the take-home message here? Okay. Well, if you have children, certainly you want to help them to succeed, of course. Okay. But don't engineer or guarantee their success, because and you can do that as an adult, you know the game, you know how to do it. You can help them and you can give them advice and you can I mean, we know what we all are guilty of it. Most parents are. Certainly you want to help your children to succeed, but don't engineer or guarantee their success. If you do that, you deny your children the opportunity to learn how to deal with disappointment. Because as we've stressed throughout, everybody's going to experience disappointment. It's our obligation as a parent to prepare our children, to teach them how to succeed, but to teach them how to fail.
Absolutely.
Gracious winner, gracious loser.
Absolutely. And the earlier, the better.
Right.
The stakes are far less severe in elementary school and much more critical in college.
That's right.
If you can teach them this early on so that they know from the beginning, this is what life is like. Sometimes you win, and sometimes, more often, you don't quite meet that mark that we're shooting for. But you just keep going, you keep trying.
Right. If I have children, I want them to get an F in second grade.
Right.
Because guess what? No one's ever going to know.
Right.
But if you get an F in college, it stays on your transcript forever.
Right.
Okay. So if you're gonna fail, the younger the better.
Right.
Okay. But learn this lesson early, and learn this lesson when the consequences are not so great.
Right.
If my children fail at anything, whether it's relationships or school, I want them to fail while I'm around, while they're still living with me. I don't want their first failure to be when they're in a college 1,000 miles away.
Right.
Okay?
And it's good for parents to prepare ahead of time, have a script, and spend as much time preparing for this as you would if they were succeeding. How are you going to talk to them about falling short and not quite making the benchmark that they were shooting for? How do you build that encouragement for them so that they can pick up and continue and try again?
That's right. I think the best advice that we could give is you have to have a plan for this. You're already making a plan. I heard about a school somewhere. Parents enroll their children at conception.
Yeah.
They're pregnant, so let's get her name on the list. And what that means is these parents are really preparing their child for, they're going to go to this preschool and this elementary school and this middle school and this, because I want them to go to Harvard. So I'm going to have this elaborate plan, and I'm going to hire a college coach, to help them with their applications. I want you to spend as much time planning for and what you're going to say and how you're going to help your children manage the inevitable failures that they're going to experience. So have a plan, have a script.
Right. And be consistent. Just don't give the message that, you have to succeed, you have to succeed, you have to succeed. And then when they fail, you just say, okay, it's all right, but let's go. You have to be consistent and say, again, losing is just as important as winning,
and
from the perspective of growth.
Right. And don't let your child blame anybody else.
Right.
Okay. It might be the teachers. I hate when parents, we'll have to talk to your teacher about this. No, please don't do that. Okay. Not in elementary school, not in middle school, not even in high school. Okay. let your child deal with these disappointments. Okay. You and I remember it was years ago, and this little girl, I think she was in middle school or high school, ran up to her father and said that she didn't make the first team. I think it was a soccer team or something, and she was disappointed because she didn't make the first team. And she went running to her dad, and she wanted her dad to intervene. Dad, I didn't make it good. He looked at her and said, "Try harder."
Right.
That was the end of the discussion.
Right.
Right. What a valuable thing to me, that was a valuable thing to work hard. No, he said, work harder. Okay. That's how you succeed. I'm not going to intervene so that you can succeed. You have to do that on your own.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Or teachers blaming parents.
Mhm.
Parents blaming teachers. If the kid doesn't do well, I'll talk to your teacher about this. Please don't do that. Okay. Let your child deal with his or her teacher, unless it's abusive. Okay.
Right.
But generally, most teachers are not abusive. Okay. That's not what you're dealing with. You have to, because even if 99% of the fault is the teachers, you go and have a discussion about that 1% with your child.
Mhm.
That's what your child needs. Take responsibility for the 1%.
Right.
Can't do anything about it. Don't focus on the 9. Don't focus on the teacher's contribution to this. The teacher didn't put the grade in. The teacher didn't do this. The teacher didn't do that. That has no meaning. You take just the portion that is your child's responsibility and discuss that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So, I guess the bottom line is, whoever you are, if you're a college student, if you're an adult, if you are a kid, if you're a parent, whoever you are, push yourself to do more, to go outside of that comfort zone, to push yourself outside of where your base skills are, to learn more, to try more. It's not going to succeed all the time. It's going to fail. And when that happens, learn how to cope with it. Teach your kids how to cope with it, how to learn from it, how to build and strengthen themselves from it. We built, our hardest metals, our hardest substances that we have are made from creating faults. Whenever you look at a blacksmith, they beat that metal up to make it stronger, and then they burn it to make it weak, and then they hit it again and make it stronger. And that's what failure can do. Failure makes you stronger and more capable and longer lasting. And we should start that at the beginning.
Yeah, what Howard Diamond's created: lots of pressure, lots of heat. Steel, lots of. The more times you read when they build these world-class swords, you keep firing it and pounding it and firing. And that's what we have to do with ourselves. We have to be in that position of learning how to manage the failures that are going to come our way. You learn how to manage your failures. That's what you have to do. And we want to be success pursuing rather than failure avoiding.
Right.
If all you're doing is success, don't just avoid failure. Failure has important lessons to teach you. And so push yourself as hard as you can and experience those disappointments and figure out how to overcome them. That's life. Those are the skills that you need.
Absolutely. So, all right, that is it for today.
What are we, halfway through November?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Thanksgiving.
Yep. Here it comes.
Coming right up, right?
Yep. A week and a half ago.
Holidays. You would never know it's the holiday season. All you have to do is step out of your house for a minute, and it's already Christmas.
Some of my neighbors already have their Christmas tree up.
All over the place. There are lights appearing in houses, yard light, whatever they call those things, yard lights. They're already all over the place. So get ready. I think because people are tired of COVID, they're tired of not having celebrated the holidays. Some people have missed 2, right?
Yeah.
No, just one Christmas, 2020.
Yeah.
But everybody's trying to, I guess everybody's bursting at the seams to begin to celebrate. So
they are.
Okay.
All right.
Good seeing you again.
Good to see you.
Okay.
Until next time, man.
Have a good day.
You too. Stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.